It's time for Supply Chain Now Radio, broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the country, Atlanta, Georgia. Supply Chain Now Radio spotlights the best in all things supply chain. The people, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey, good morning. Scott Luton here with you live on Supply Chain Now Radio. Welcome back to the show. In today's show, we continue our reverse logistics series. We are all talking all things reverse logistics, returns, and a lot more. And if you want to conduct a podcast on reverse logistics, you couldn't find a better partner than the Reverse Logistics Association. So we've enjoyed the kickoff to this series, and we're really looking forward to today's episode. We've got a great conversation teed up. So on a quick programming note, like all of our series on Supply Chain Now Radio, you can find our replays on a variety of channels: Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, wherever else you find your podcast. As always, we'd love to have you subscribe so you don't miss anything. Supply Chain Now Radio is also brought to you by a variety of sponsors, including the Effective Syndicate, Talent Stream, Verison, and SupplyChainRealEstate.com, and several other leading organizations. Be sure to check out the show notes to learn more about our valuable sponsors. So let's welcome in my co-host today, Greg White, co-host Supply Chain Now Radio, serial supply chain tech entrepreneur, and semi-trusted advisor. How you doing, Greg? It depends on the day.
It depends on what I'm driving.
That's right.
If I'm driving a semi, then I'm fully trusted.
Good to have you back.
Yeah, great to be here. Always love to have Tony with us, and great to add Joe to the mix.
Tony and Joe's friends.
These cats might know each other.
Yes,
right?
We just might.
Just a little bit. We got a great conversation teed up. We had an interesting conversation this morning on the State of Logistics Technology report that EFT put out. That was interesting. And then, one of our newest series, this Reverse Logistics series, has gotten a lot of feedback, garnered a lot of feedback. We've got a lot of inbound messages and questions and topics that are suggested. So great to dive back in with Tony and Joe here. So let's introduce our featured guest, the one and only Tony Shirota, Executive Director with the Reverse Logistics Association. Tony, how you doing?
Doing great. I'm happy to be here.
Great to have you back. Enjoyed our August edition of this series and look forward to what's I think going to be a very relevant and compelling conversation here today. And Tony, your good friend, former colleague, Joe Hurley, Senior Vice President, Business Development at Encompass Supply Chain Solutions. Joe, how you doing?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Great to have you down from Knoxville. Great city.
Knoxville.
And hopefully traffic wasn't too bad making your way down here.
It wasn't. Well, it wasn't great, but it wasn't too bad.
Okay. All right. So welcome to you both. Great to have you here. So Tony, as always, we always want to paint a picture in our listeners' minds of kind of who our guests are. Now, you've been on the show before. I think we kind of took a deep dive in your background last month. But to refresh our listeners' memory, tell us about who Tony Shirota is in a nutshell.
Well, I've been in sales and marketing for a number of years. And then back in around turn of the century, Phillips decided, I'd been there about 10, 15 years, and they decided they needed to do something about returns. And suddenly I moved from being a sales and marketing guy to being a returns guy and figuring out the endless issue of how do you slow down returns, make them go away, and not take things back that are still working and still good, and seeing those liquidated and wasted in the universe here. So I did that. I was very successful at Phillips in finding ways to work with retailers and do something good for both sides, reduce returns, reduce their costs, find new homes for those goods that did come back, that had to be resold. And some of that activity now has developed into running this Reverse Logistics Association. We've been around the association for about 15 years. I was on the advisory board, and then I took over in 2016, and I'm calling us RLA 2.0 as an indication of we are very different than the way it started. We're members focused. Members are the retailers, the manufacturers who have the returns problems, and then companies like Encompass with Joe Hurley, who have some third-party solutions partnerships and ideas and programs that are effective ways of reducing returns.
Well put. And we've collaborated on a number of different things from a number of different angles, but you can tell the member focus in this RLA 2.0, and that's in this ever-changing industry association landscape. It's much different than what it has been 10, 20 years ago. That is so, you got associations that get that have a laser focus on their members and their customers, so to speak, and you got others that don't. And so I welcome, it's like a breath of fresh air with the RLA. Okay, so Joe, the before mentioned Joe Hurley. So you're new to the show. Let's kind of paint a picture for our listeners. So first off, where are you from?
Born and raised in Orlando, Florida.
Okay. And so now we see the Florida Gator connection.
Yeah, there you go. There it is.
Fantastic. Now, what did you do before your role now at Encompass?
I worked for Philips for a number of years. Literally the day after high school, I moved to East Tennessee to attend Carson Newman College, now University. Go Eagles.
Let's go Eagles.
Yep. And to work my way through college, beer money and rent money and whatnot, I got a job at Philips in the call center. So customer service 101, avoiding returns 101.
Right.
So I did a lot of the little old lady with a VCR flashing 12 on the front, helped her get that time right, set her timer recording and all that kind of stuff. So I'm dating myself, I know with that. But, what are you gonna do? So, but I loved it. That fit me like a glove. I just loved the industry, loved the call center business, did that for Philips for a number of years, and then eventually made my way over to the parts business, which is where I am now for all intents and purposes. That's what Encompass does. We are a parts distributor. We do much more than that. So that's how kind of Tony and I met at Philips and have stayed in touch. And when I heard about RLA 2.0, Encompass was all too eager to be a participant, to be a supporter. In fact, last week we hosted a tour at our facility during one of their events in Fort Lauderdale. So proud supporter, definitely a lot of synergies between our two organizations.
And the tours are where it's at. That's some of the secret sauce. I mean, getting folks out into the operation to put their eyes and ears on what's going on, what's working, what are some of the challenges. I mean, that really, that's a great reason, one of the great reasons to be plugged into a group like RLA, right?
That's right. Absolutely.
But it takes organizations to open the doors. So appreciate Encompass doing that. So speaking of Encompass, what does the company do?
Okay, well, we are in the aftermarket services business. We specialize in parts logistics, 3PL services, 4PL, depot repair, asset recovery, board repair, any part of that process that could possibly include a part solution. We are right there in the mix of things.
I think in some of our email exchanges, you refer to yourself as the parts guy.
The parts guy.
Right?
That's right. Parts guys are, kind of unique. You can put two of us in a room of 100 people, and it'll take about 90 seconds for us to find each other. So, I like to say there's really one way out of the parts business, and that's the pine box.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Let's keep you in the parts business for a long time.
Yeah.
So,
as long as we know what your goals are.
That's right. So specifically with your role, where do you spend your time?
I spend my time working with the OEMs, the manufacturers, aligning programs that fit their needs, that support their objectives. Also with the customers that need access to those parts. Today we support well over 200 brands and 20 different product categories. And our job is to optimize that inventory, make sure we have the parts in stock that they need when they need them, get them to the customers in time, and make that whole entire transaction completely transparent. Usually we find that just the access to information is half the battle. Hey, here, I have the part you need. I've shipped it. Here's a tracking number. It's going to get to you. Everybody involved in that process needs to know about that. The OEM, us, of course, the customer, the consumer on the other end.
Right.
And if you can provide them with access to that inventory, we find that, of course, we sell a lot more parts, which is our objective, and reduces returns. So if you can connect the customer with a consumable, a spare part, the do-it-yourselfer with what they need to repair their own product, perhaps, the service industries that service these customers, then that's what we're trying to do.
So you are essentially creating economies of scale for companies like Philips who can't get the kind of scale that you can by carrying a part that may fit multiple devices or multiple brands of devices. Is that a fair estimation of what you're doing?
It certainly is. And moreover, for a Philips, let's say, to have their own parts infrastructure to build that for one brand versus me supporting it for 200 plus brands, I have enormous economies of scale and can do it much more economically than they can and efficiently.
And you're doing more than just, you're the parts guy, but you're doing more than just parts there as well. I mean, are you the face of the customer, toward the customer?
Sure.
Ever?
Absolutely. Yeah. And we provide other services as well, like board repair. We bring back circuit boards, for instance, in consumer electronic products. We stock them. In some cases, we bring them back and send them back to the OEM, or in other cases, we repair them ourselves. We do that in concert with what the OEM's objectives are. But that creates sustainability, keeps the products out in the marketplace, keeps them repairable, keeps the parts affordable, and reduces, we think, products from being disposed of unnecessarily.
That's a great point. And I love the sustainability angle. We've talked about this maybe on earlier shows. I've got a printer by a big name, and I bought it 4 or 5 years ago when we were printing a bunch of courseware. And unfortunately, the first printer waved the white flag after a couple of months, and it just went kaput. Well, the next day or 2 days later, I had a new printer, a remanufactured printer on my front door. And they made it really easy to put the old one in the same box and send it back. And I've been using the same remanufactured printer ever since and haven't missed a beat. And so I love the sustainability factor that you're speaking to there.
Yeah, that's great. It's an interesting example. That very well could have been us that sent you that replacement. We have a number of those programs in the printer industry. It used to be a lot more robust than it was when the prices were higher for printer products. But we do a ton of that in Lawrenceville today.
Interesting.
And that's where I was going to jump in and say, Joe and Encompass are the hidden face of the customer. They're the hidden face to the consumer, because it might have been an HP printer, it might have been a Ricoh printer, but behind the scenes, behind the front page that you looked at, Scott, when you went for the problem, is Encompass. And so you don't see their name, but you see that they're running that page for them and taking care of it, as Joe said. So it's kind of like Encompass is the back door, the back room, the behind the scenes, getting it done and getting it done effectively. So while a lot of people don't know the name Encompass, but they know HP and they know Lenovo and they know all these other brand names that have a website that says, if you need a part, come here, and suddenly you're on Joe's door.
That's right.
This model has been used in the aerospace and aeronautical industry for a long, long time. Their parts are very, very expensive, obviously, right? Yep. So it's similar to that, where somebody sort of pools all of this work, and then, the number you dial determines how the person answers the call, right? Yes. Or the website that you hit determines how you get funneled through the process. Yep. Yeah.
You're showing
it's a great service.
You're showing your air capital of the world lineage very well.
Can't help it. Yeah, can't help it.
Wichita, Kansas.
Yeah.
Okay, so one more question before we talk about how you got involved and why you got involved in RLA is, Joe, at Encompass, are you feeling some of the pressures when it comes to just the speed of the Amazon era we live in?
Absolutely. It's changed tremendously since I've been in the parts business, which is about 20 years now. Used to be, hey, here's your part. You call your order in, you'll get it in 5, 6, 7 days. Oh, you didn't get it, call me back. There was all that. There's a lot more visibility now, and the expectation is, I order it today by 5 p.m. I want it tomorrow, and I don't care where it is. So they want it in a day, 2 days max. Yeah. So that's how we have tried to retool our solution to ensure that happens. Not only us, but others like us out in the marketplace selling in different verticals get that part to the customer the next day. By the way, no one wants to buy anything these days without seeing it first. So here's a photo. Here's the UPC. Here's the GS1. Here's the weight, dimensions, everything they could possibly want to know about it, and then I'll buy it from you. So that's how we've had to adapt our solution, even in my tenure at Encompass.
Wow. Kick the tire 17 times.
That's
sometimes.
Right.
Well, people are frustrated by the process. First of all, their product breaks, then they get a part and it doesn't work. And we've lost our ability to tolerate that, right? I mean, the Amazon effect, if that's what you want to call it, but the reality is we didn't really need to tolerate it. well, we had to tolerate it before. We didn't want to tolerate it.
Right.
It was kind of a latent desire, but now that ability to deliver in a day, to be able to see and evaluate a product, it exists. It's become an expectation, right?
Yes, absolutely, expectations. And last time we talked about number one driver for returns and dissatisfaction with consumers are the unmet expectations. And that Amazon effect you mentioned, Greg, that's we want it here, we want it now, we want it to be perfect. And if it's not, it's free to send it back, and we will.
Yeah.
Well put. Okay, so let's talk about why and when you got involved, Joe, in the Reverse Logistics Association.
Well, we were involved with RLA prior to Tony. I would say somewhat.
PT, let's call that PT.
Yeah, PT. we were RLA back in the PT days, but we really got serious and focused with RLA 2.0.
Yep.
Tony came along. Obviously, there was I know him, I know what he's about, and what was really eager to see what the reboot looked like, and we've been just very pleased, and it's been beneficial to us. There's a lot of cross-pollination between what Encompass does and the RLA industry, so we're proud supporters.
Yeah.
We are too. Okay, so let's dive into the red meat of today's conversation that is universally relevant, really. It's hard to think of a segment of the end-to-end supply chain that returns and reverse logistics does not touch these days. Right. So we're going to be picking y'all's brain on how can our listeners reduce returns? Multi-million-dollar question these days. But first, let's state the obvious in many ways. Why, Tony, the question for you, why are returns and growing day by day, hour by hour, and why the huge emphasis these days on reverse logistics?
So we related it to a couple of things. One is what Greg just said about that Amazon effect. Consumer expectations are higher than they've ever been in history, and they want it delivered above. Now, it used to be that we try to exceed expectations. That's a major challenge these days to try to do that. So there's the Amazon effect, which is really related to e-commerce. Right. The fact that a lot of, not as much as people think, but a lot of business is happening via e-commerce. And e-commerce means, for example, if you order clothing, you're going to order a size above what you think you need, a size below what you think you need, and hope that the size you order that you think you need is going to work, but that's automatically 2/3 of the products are going back. And that's happening with the e-commerce world, where the returns are much higher than when you go in a store, you touch it, you feel it, you look at it. So there's that effect. We also mentioned, I think the last time, the IoT effect. And this gets into the whole issue of what's going on in this world, where they now know everything about you from a marketing standpoint, because you're wired and you're connected. Whether your shoes are smart shoes or a smartwatch or a smartphone or your purchase habits, everyone knows when you go online and you look for a flight to the United Kingdom, for example, you're suddenly flooded on Facebook with a bunch of ads that relate to airline flights. So the marketing aspect of this IoT, Internet of Things, we are all connected, we are all wired. Well, there's a little problem with that one, too. The IoT standards by the IEEE, there's over 300 variations, which means there's 300 ways that things cannot talk to each other and break and appear to break and appear to not connect. And that's the number one driver of returns as well.
All I want to do is pair my remote with my TV. That's all I want to do. Sometimes I feel all 300 of those variations of how things can't connect. All right, so clearly, just as you laid out, but also going back to, you were talking about the customer focus and giving the customer what they want. Well, in some cases that we talked about in the pre-show, customers are buying multiple items because, to your point, Joe, they want to touch it and feel it and wear it, and they're going to keep one and send several back, right?
Yep.
And that is the era we live in. You're talking about one of the resources that you use, and you're trying things out and send it back. And we got to process all that stuff, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, and returns is part of the model now.
Yeah, that's right.
Completely.
Companies not only provision for it, because Tony, you probably know these numbers better, but old numbers were 30-odd% of all e-commerce sales at least came back, right? It may be higher than that now.
It's trending upward.
Yeah.
It's definitely trending upward.
Well, as e-commerce goes up, and as you talked about, that Amazon effect, that instantaneous gratification or that expectation of flawless service, as that continues to increase, it's going to happen like that, right?
So here we are at Supply Chain Now Radio. We're in the supply chain world, and this is sort of good news for everyone that's listening to this podcast, right? Because it means you're going to move a lot more boxes. You have the opportunity to move a lot more product around the country and around the world, because the next nightmare that's coming up is cross-border returns. As the Amazons and Newegg's and Bed Bath & Beyond and Wayfairs of the world say, okay, we'll start to ship to Canada, to Mexico, maybe even across the water. The aspect of what happens with that return is its own unique nightmare when you're dealing with different countries, different rules, different regulations. But from a supply chain side, wow, the future looks very bright.
Agreed. We are growing our ability to create and bring more value to the table, right, in this global economy that we're in. And whether you're moving boxes or whether you're crunching numbers as a supply chain analyst behind the scenes, so to speak, or whether you're leading warehouse operations or you name it, there's so many different ways that we can solve problems proactively these days with all the data available and make it happen. So, but let's bring it back to reducing returns. I keep wanting to say eliminate returns, but we're not going to say that.
Tony said don't say that.
Yeah, that's right.
Say that word.
I got an AT.
Yeah.
Got to ask Tony.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about reducing returns. And what I love about shows like this is this isn't conjecture. We're sitting with two folks that have done this. And if our listeners will take some notes, like I'm really good at doing maybe, they're going to learn some tried and true, proven best practices for positioning your organization, your operation for reducing returns, right?
Well, let's bring this back to Joe's early days in life in the call center world and the uniqueness of the call center world and how that's shifted about 180 degrees or more if possible. In those old days, Joe and others like him on a call center trying to solve someone's problem, you're really trying to make them happy with what they own because usually there's nothing wrong with it, there's nothing defective about it. But the driver at many corporations until maybe the early 2000s, the driver was reduce call time. Reduce, because you're cutting costs, because every minute on the phone costs something. And then you flip that one on its end with a company like Zappos in the shoe business. They brag about how long their call center agents talk to their customers. They're proud of it. They can average 25 minutes per phone call. And again, if a CFO was watching that and saying, no, reduce costs, they'd be cutting the average handling time and some of those metrics that Joe and others have participated in. But we learned that we needed to flip that around. It isn't about how short can you make the call, it's how happy can you make the customer. And that's a dramatic change that came along with that Net Promoter Score change as opposed to just measuring failure. Things like first-time resolution they were important in those old days, and frankly, companies like Philips, we used to penalize our call center agents or our partners if they didn't reduce average handling time and if they didn't reduce first-time resolution. But that's the first point of contact with that customer to avoid a return or to minimize a return or to reduce the returns. And again, Joe's lived that life, so he can speak to it even more.
I sure have. Your customer service agents are your number one salespeople. You don't want to rush them off the phone with a customer. If someone wants to call you and tell you about their grandkid or their dog, just have that conversation. You're building a relationship with that customer, and they'll be back. They'll remember that.
They sure will. I had a call in to a financial institution yesterday, and
everybody just got the exact same feeling all at once.
Well, you know what? Kudos to this CSR. She did a wonderful job. What I love when I call into customer service is the good ones don't just read the policy and start and stop there. She put me on hold a couple times to go back and ask the questions and do some digging, and that really, when I hung up 24 minutes later, 25 minutes later, I didn't have exactly what I needed, but I knew a lot more than when I went in, and that's due to that person's doggedness of not just mailing it in. She set out to help give me what I needed, and that was a great experience. So, but going back to reducing returns, one of the first points we're making here that I'm hearing is it starts with the customer service representative. It starts with the call centers. It starts, really upstream to really maybe, not to put words in your mouth, Tony, but what I heard y'all speak to is maybe educating the customer that it is working just like it's supposed to work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to make it easy for the customer to get a hold of you and obvious. Like, okay, I've got your product. I've unboxed it. I've done something with it. Now what? I'm confused. I have a question. Don't make that return something that they want to do. Make it obvious. Nope. Stop. Call this number. Go to this URL. Here are the instructions. They're very clear. They're actually in plain English or whatever language you speak. And here you go.
YouTube English.
Yeah, exactly.
And in English.
Yeah. And that's a great point too. Have that content out there. Now we strive to do that. Make it easy. Here's how you change the water filter in your refrigerator, or here's the accessory you need to make this do what you want. It wasn't supplied, but here's an easy and inexpensive way to get it.
Yep.
And just to go back to the fact that we know most products that do come back through the channels are not defective. There's no technical failure. So that means a company like Encompass and Joe's People are that first stop where you can prevent something coming back that's not really broken in any way. It's simply that the customer doesn't understand it. And the criticalness of those call center agents can't be undersold. And Joe, maybe you're seeing that most corporations are getting that message these days. They're focused on not reducing average handling time, but improving customer satisfaction.
Well, I wish I could say that I'm saying that, but just in my own personal life, I'm not.
Good try, Tony.
Yeah,
I tried.
I wish it were that case. But
I think that's a recognition that the industry needs to have.
I agree.
I mean, look, this guy, Tony, if you're only on podcast, I'm pointing at Tony. Tony is a pioneer in this, and I think a high thinker relative to this, because one of the solutions that he relayed to us in the previous podcast was, hey, don't just wait till there's a return to solve the problem. Try to preempt that. And one of the preemptive measures that you had talked about was letting people know what to expect and helping them understand how to work the product. In your day, maybe with paper, right? Nowadays, a YouTube video or whatever it is, but preempt that lack of understanding, that lack of satisfaction. I think more companies ought to be focusing in those two areas, preempting and responding effectively.
Are you taking a peek at my show notes here? So, or you got a great crystal ball?
I never look at the show notes. That's why I always ask everything out of order.
So one of the things you're touching on that I'd love to get Joe and Tony to weigh in on is that repair videos, that do-it-yourself culture.
Yes. How
does that factor into reducing returns?
Well, I thought, Joe, if I don't know if Encompass has made it, but there's a legendary figure now in the industry. His name is Kyle Wiens, with a website called ifixit.com.
Right.
And I just saw Kyle this week at the eScrap show in Orlando. And Kyle is literally, he was a born tinkerer, right? And he loved to fix things. And so he created this website where people can post videos of literally fixing anything. Anything from car issues to electronics, and he's a strong advocate for the Right to Repair organization and legislation that they're pushing around the country, because if you let a customer take care of what it is that they've got, and you've got a company like Encompass in the background that can help supply the parts to do that, those videos on YouTube, etc., are amazing. And again, I'm sure Joe's going to say not enough companies are doing it, which is sort of sad, but I'll let Joe add a little bit to that.
Yeah, sure. You can find out how to do just about anything on YouTube and elsewhere. Yep. I do it all the time around the house. And as my wife can attest, I'm not the handiest guy in the world, but I am cheap. So I will go out, I'll fix my own faucet, I'll do whatever if I can.
Right.
And YouTube is an invaluable resource. And so we try to participate in that. We have a number of different, even on our site, of do-it-yourself videos. And we've seen a real shift from the OEM level. When I first got into the service business, oh no, you don't want to repair your own item. Don't do it.
Right.
Avoid your warranty. If you're out of warranty, it's a bad idea.
Now it's like, we'll send you the wrench.
Yeah, here you go. Yeah. And sometimes provided in the box.
Yeah.
So we've seen a real shift in that. So not every company, I think, is embracing it yet, but that is certainly the direction that things are going.
Yay.
So what I would like to see is, it seems like, so I've had the same vehicle, same sedan, 5 different versions, almost the same exact car. And then we've had 2 or 3 versions of the same truck. And I used to be able to change my old headlights. My wife will not, sounds like, Joe, me and you might have it in common. My wife knows how unhandy I am.
Right.
But when I could go in there and change my own headlamps on the first version of this truck, I was like, man, I've really done something. And so y'all can snicker all you can, but
We are.
And then the new truck came out, and you have to take off the whole fender to get to the headlamps. What in the world? I guess they wanted to protect the time in the repair shops, right?
There are a lot of reasons for that, but some of it has to do with crash safety, particularly on cars. But there are ways to make that accessible.
Well, there's
and a YouTube video probably can show you how to do it without breaking anything.
We checked all about YouTube. Unfortunately, the videos I saw were with folks that seemed to be much more technical than I was.
They all seem that way when I'm watching them.
I can see the fender just falling off. But Tony, you're about to say something.
Well, Joe can tell you the stories about my fights with the engineers back in the old days, because the engineers are convinced that they know how to make the perfect product, and they point to their tests on the returns that are coming back that they're not technically at fault, so they think that they're geniuses. But remember, we may have mentioned the other side of the world in engineering, human factor engineers, and clearly one's missing, Scott, on that truck that you're trying to replace the light bulb. But the human factor engineers, the companies that pay attention, they recognize that simplicity and ease of use is just as critical as whether it technically works or not. It's, can the customer get their hands on it? Another profit pioneer, whatever you want to call him, in that was Steve Jobs. I mean, look at the iPods and things like that. He minimized the buttons so that it couldn't confuse people. Right. And then you've got the other end of the extreme where you've got the 12 different buttons that do the same thing on a cell phone or products like that. Right. So there's got to be that change and that shift on the ease of use. And again, by the way, a company like Encompass, and I'll let Joe speak to it, they're aware of the kinds of issues that they get the most calls on, or the product parts that they get the most calls on. And companies don't listen enough to the Encompasses of the world as to, hey, you got a problem with this design. I mean, they should have fixed it before, but at least a company like Encompass can reach up and say, hey, guys, red flag here, and I'll let Joe tell one of those stories.
So, Joe, it sounds like you and your team are making Wilfredo Pareto very happy. Yeah, tell us more.
We are. So I'll give you an example. We have a product today in the keyless entry lock space, name brand, that we handle all the reverse logistics for. We bring them back, we test them. Something like 70% of them, there's absolutely nothing wrong with them, or at least that's the way it was. So we brought them in, and we've developed a test procedure and a recertification procedure, and we put it back in a brown box and use them for warranty replacements for ones that actually are defective, and then this particular company then sells the B goods in secondary markets. Well, we were discovering over and over again, here's the same issue over and over again, and there's nothing wrong with it. What do we need to do upstream to reduce that? And so we've been working with this particular company, and it seems like the returns are coming down, and those reasons that we see that they're coming back are beginning to be reduced. So it's important for if the return does come back, use that as an opportunity to reduce returns in the future.
Yeah. So moving upstream sounds to be is critical to producing returns, right?
It is, for sure.
Okay, so let's talk about one of the things that we were talking pre-show was that access to spare parts and accessories. How does that, and we've kind of alluded to that and spoken to that through the conversation, but tell us more about that how that can impact ability to reduce returns.
Yeah, you bet. So we find that a lot of, particularly overseas manufacturers, spare parts and accessories are an afterthought. Laser focus is on production, reducing production costs, making this product, doing a run, and retooling and moving on to the next thing. And we're always kind of in the background saying, hey, don't forget about us. How many products are you manufacturing? Based on our experience in that particular industry, this is the known failure rate. And going back to the design of the product, did you design it with serviceability in mind?
Right.
And if so, what are the service parts that would be necessary in a service scenario, which are going to be a fraction of the actual parts used to manufacture the product? So we're out there trying to make that message clear. You got to have service parts available. This is how many you need. And in my industry, the ideal scenario is you procure just enough to where the last one you ever sold was the last one you ever needed. Well, that has never happened and probably never will. So it's always kind of a gamble. Do you have too few or do you have too many? Both have their own drawbacks.
Right.
So we try to do a number of things to prevent that. We mentioned core repair earlier. Any part, any time that you can bring back and can be repaired, you probably should take a strong look at that as a manufacturer. Whether you partner with someone like Encompass or you do it yourself, that serves a number of purposes. It reduces your excess and obsolescence risk, because if you have a defective part sitting there and you got to recycle that at some point, no big deal. It keeps the product in the marketplace for a longer period of time, makes it more repairable, makes typically the price of the part is going to be less.
Yep.
And if I'm a customer and I buy a product and 3 years later, let's say, I can't get it repaired or I can't get it repaired economically, that does not speak very well for the brand. That does not build your brand recognition. However, if I can get it repaired fairly cheaply and efficiently, then I may consider that brand again in the future. When you have a repair scenario with a product, it's an opportunity. It's not something you want to happen, obviously, as a manufacturer, as a customer, as anyone. But if it does happen, use that as an opportunity to build your brand. Don't go the opposite direction by not having spare parts in stock.
Right.
And let's bring in another terminology that Joe just alluded to, that core repair. I love being in reverse logistics and the returns management world, but honestly, it started in the automotive industry. 100 years ago, Henry Ford and the other pioneers said, you know what, we shouldn't just throw engines away or alternators away or starters or batteries. We should figure out a way to reuse them.
Yep.
And that was that entire core: return, repair, replace, and use it again, and use it again. And that's part of the broad term now is the circular economy.
Yep.
I know we didn't delve into that very much last time. It's more appropriate today when Joe and companies like Encompass they're the cornerstone of the circular economy. And millennials and other young people are now getting a little more passionate about the fact that they don't just want to buy something and throw it away.
Right.
I mean, they've gone through that enough with all the cell phones every year, throwing one away, getting a new one. And people are starting to react to that and saying, we have to figure out a different way. So it's important to say that this circular economy concept, which is being watchdogged by many companies that are participating, but also companies that are not participating, that are getting caught doing stupid things with their returns. And I had the privilege of being in front of the Amazon organization recently, Amazon Renewed Group. They've devoted this entire business growth now to selling those return goods. They know they're generating a lot, and they'll do what they can to stop them. But on the flip side, they're now building an entire business of this Amazon Renewed product, and those are products that companies like Encompass are able to produce because they had a high no-fault found return rate.
Yeah. Well, and Encompass and companies like them are inherently part of that circular economy by creating those economies of scale just for the parts. I mean, I couldn't help but think, as you were saying, you're always left with some parts, right, by the time a product is completely obsolete, but better those tiny parts go back into the ecosystem than 150,000 televisions or something like that, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
I think inherently in your business is that circular economy and sustainability.
Yep.
By pooling products from multiple companies, you create less duplication and waste as well.
You do.
So let's talk about this notion. You mentioned automotive, and as you described that, I thought of
Remanufacturing.
definitely. And there's a neat business here based in the Atlanta area called Pull Apart, and they run a variety of I hate to use the word junkyards. They probably use a different term.
Salvage.
Thank you very much. And they really help facilitate the reusage and be able to find the spare parts going back years or a fairly recent automobile. And of course, we also know that in the aerospace, you brought up aerospace before, there's a lot of cannibalization. Being in the Air Force, we were sometimes pulling parts off one aircraft that had other issues.
Right, if it's not airworthy.
Yeah, to keep the other one
not
flying.
use all the other parts?
Mission capable. That's right. So this notion of harvesting parts to supplement the supply chain. Joe, Tony, I'll speak towards that notion.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, sure. So you bring a product back and you do everything you can to make it in like new condition, but in some cases it's just not possible. Say a TV, for instance. If the screen is cracked, forget about it. But there are 3, 4, 5 boards in there that are very useful. There's the stand, there's the base, there's all sorts of things that you can salvage from that to produce a higher yield on the next batch that comes in. And then there are even going to be parts left over from that process that you didn't need in the refurbishment process that you can offer in the marketplace, and then at a fraction of what the new part would cost. So that extends the life of the product, makes the parts less expensive, and everyone's happy. I know I, for one, have no problems at all buying something that's remanufactured or reused. Now, that could be because I've been in the industry so long, and they're actually better products in a lot of cases, have the latest software updates, et cetera. But that is one of the ways that you can use the harvesting solution to help supplement the supply chain. And it does all the other wonderful things that, say, core recovery does. It reduces your inventory value. It reduces your E&O risk. It, produces a higher fill rate, which means the customer's happy. They're getting their product repaired or back up in service, or a consumable or something that they may have not been able to obtain otherwise, and they're happy with your brand. Net Promoter Score goes up. Rinse and repeat that entire cycle as many times as possible.
Agreed. And you mentioned the Amazon group earlier, Tony, and some of the things they're doing to on the return side. But I would argue that in this day and age, you can buy remanufactured products much more prevalent than any other time, right?
Sure.
It seems like there's always that option. A lot of stuff that we purchase online.
Absolutely. We're feeding the beast because returns are going up. Those returns need to be resold, as opposed to the companies that got caught, like the Burberrys of the world and H&M, where they were burning the returns. Louis Vuitton, burning the return purses because they wanted to protect the brand, as opposed to figuring out how to offer a value in the secondary market. And there is a balancing act that Joe and I both know from Philips days between protecting your brand and making products affordable in a secondary market, because the fear of you're cannibalizing new goods sales. But the circular economy demands that you pay attention to that. You don't just burn it, you don't just throw it away, you find a reuse for it, and everyone cares about that more and more these days.
Yeah, why don't we just go burn some tires or hunt some bald eagles? What a short-sighted approach. I hate to hear that. It seems like there's so many better solutions in this day and age.
Or be creative. I mean, tires have been shredded and made into running tracks in high schools around the country.
Football fields all over the country.
Right.
Well, there's a business up the road that it's been a couple years since I sat down, but they developed one of the first fully green tires. So especially for like the mining industry and some of these other where you get these huge tires, right? Well, at the end of its usage, it'd go into a machine and out comes natural gas, out comes oil, and out comes even the belting that's within it can be recycled. It's fascinating technology,
Wow.
Okay, so let's talk about it. Before we move on, because Tony, we want to ask, and it's important for our listeners to know, the Reverse Logistics Association is global. So these are global opportunities for you to plug in. We're going to pick Tony's brain on momentarily. But anything else do y'all think that you can share with our listeners that are trying to manage returns? Anything else come to mind?
Tony?
Specifically on minimizing returns, let's not forget the basics. Let's make the instruction books in plain, simple English. Unfortunately, I think we talked about it at that 6th grade level that people know and love. Make sure that it's easy to use, that the buttons aren't complicated. So instructions, the fit. I mean, there's things that people need to do about fit that they can do. I think we made jokes about the cameras that take pictures of your body and sizes it up for you, but there's other software programs now that are out there solution-wise. And then the key is this circular economy. There will be returns. The no-fault found returns we talked about before. It doesn't mean that there's something didn't go wrong. Something went wrong for the consumer, and Joe and others like that help determine what that really is. But make sure you understand that you're paying attention to it. We talked about that, the message inside the box when they open it up. Don't be a red stop sign, be a gold star, congratulations. So let's be very circular going forward and reduce returns by representing the product for what it is, and don't promise that it does something that it won't do very easily.
Yep. I would also add to that, meet the customer where they are in terms of how they want to interact with you. If it's social media, if it's, if they want to pick up the phone and call you, if they want to fax you some information or send you a smoke signal, it doesn't matter. Meet them where they are and make that interaction easy, transparent, informative. Don't rush them. Let them make their decision in their time.
Yep.
And then if you have the opportunity to help them with a service issue, I can't hook this up, I can't, something's wrong, I need a part or accessory, I need some sort of consumable, make that super simple and make the returns process, easy. If they need to return it, then that's fine. The worst thing you can do is make that difficult on them, because that does not build your brand at all. And those things, I think will help overall reduce returns.
There's one more new best practice that's out there, relatively new. Some of the online e-commerce companies are figuring out that if they offer the customer a discount to keep the product, because they know it's going to cost them X dollars. Let's take a $100 pair of shoes. They know that if they take it back, it's going to cost them X dollars to take it back, X dollars to put it back in stock, maybe resell it, maybe not be able to resell it. So they tell the customer via the chat bots or the online communications, how about if we give you a 30% discount to keep that and give it to you on your credit card right away, and you go buy something else. So that's a new best practice that I'm hearing a little more about as the e-commerce companies get a little more sophisticated about approaches to reducing returns. Offer the customer a benefit that they can use to keep it. Now, unfortunately, there's a stretch there going on, and the e-commerce world is going to be rocked when these companies, their practices of saying, you know what, just keep it, we'll give you full credit. Those stories are going to get more and more popular. Wayfair and Amazon are already being caught that they're telling people, keep your stuff, we'll just give you credit. That's going to kind of proliferate, and people are going to start taking advantage of that. So there's this balancing act between taking it back when you need to, or offering a discount, or offering to keep it for free, which gets a little bit silly. But there's the best practice, new one, though, is that discount. Thank you for your purchase, but keep it.
Information is certainly power. Information in these modern day analytics of knowing exactly what the costs are, so they can give these options back to the customer. My lovely wife Amanda just informed me that not only is my Apple Watch refurbished, but our son, who just turned 7, received a Nintendo Switch as his gift, and he's all about Super Mario, Mario, Star Wars, and Clemson, and then of course the Braves. His Nintendo Switch is refurbished, which is neat. So probably more places than I'm aware of how we're purchasing refurbished and remanufactured gifts. Thanks, Amanda. All right, so bring it right back home, right? One final point before we pick your brain on RLA, Tony, is really what I'm hearing, and we're going to talk more about this afternoon with Bo Groover and the effective syndicate. It's got to be, culturally, it's got to be important to the organization to get serious about this sustainability, get serious about taking care of the customer, but also get serious about reducing returns, right?
And again, reducing returns can be a financial driver to build your profits as well. Everyone thinks that becoming green, becoming sustainable is going to cost you money. Ultimately, it's going to pay you back because, number one, people are looking at that and they're paying attention to companies that are part of the circular economy, that are trying to be green, and they're going to start to lean towards those companies. So those are important aspects of the future of where the business is going. And so companies, Joe and I were both at Philips together when Net Promoter Score became the big thing.
Yep. Right.
And it started at the board of management level. I think I mentioned this on the last podcast, but you can never emphasize it enough. If your bottom line is your only driver, you're going to go wrong. If you start at the top and say, our driver is to make customers happy and love us and love our products, then you're going to go in a direction of this Net Promoter Score, trying to exceed expectations, make people happy. And that includes a simple, easy, but effective returns minimize process.
It's an important thing because I think people, as you said, that people have always thought of returns and the nature of whether you generate them, how much you generate, and how you handle them as a bottom line issue. But it's a top line issue today, right? You can't do stupid things like burn your stuff.
That's right.
Right? And be popular.
Tires, pocketbooks, doesn't matter.
Yeah, right? I mean, that is going to impact the top line. And as you said, you've got to think about it from both standpoints, right? Yep. Top line impact it is as much of your brand as anything else, your logo, whatever else, and bottom line. So,
yep. Okay, so moving right along from returns, and hopefully our listeners found a lot. I think I've got 17 pages of notes. Lots of good takeaway there. That I think is relevant across sectors. All right, so as our audience can probably hear, we're based once again at Vector Global Logistics today. They are making it happen back behind us, closing some business and moving some
Sounds
stuff.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Okay, so Tony, you were here probably with us about 35 days ago, and you probably have hit 17 countries since. I've been tracking your movements.
I have flown over more than 17 countries.
I believe it. Yeah. I believe it. So what's new in the Reverse Logistics Association world?
Well, right after our last podcast together, I did go to Singapore, and Asia was represented there. Countries like India participated, Australia, Japan, the Philippines, Taiwan, China, and we gave a great sessions, a day of sessions focused on sustainability, circular economy, returns reduction, with some great people from Dell, from the Circular Economy of Asia, from Shanghai University, Dr. Hao, who's Mr. Reverse Logistics of Asia, as he calls himself.
He's your cousin? Or
my cousin, yes. So Singapore was a good event, a great day of learning, and in a beautiful city halfway around the world. And I did fly over many countries on the way back. So that's a Reverse Logistics event. From there, I went to Las Vegas for the ASCM, the Supply Chain Conference, where Jack Allen of Cisco, one of my board members, spoke directly before me on the circular economy, and my follow-up was the returns world and reverse logistics. So that was good. We went to Florida, as Joe alluded to earlier and mentioned. We had a group of about 25 people touring this facility and seeing what's being done on the back end to help reduce returns. And this week was eScrap in Orlando. Again, everything that happens after the sale, I've said this before, everything that happens after the sale is part of the reverse logistics world. Whether it's call centers, whether it's repair centers, whether it's supply chain, moving it, and whether it's scrapping it. At the end of the day, scrapping is an important, viable option. And I shouldn't say scrapping, I should say recycling. That's really the correct term, because these companies in Orlando are all focused on ways to make better use out of the returns. And that's becoming a challenge, of course, because China closed their door and said, don't send any more plastics, scrap, metals, anything over here. So these companies are being entrepreneurial and creative, finding new ways to keep the products here and do something with them. And that's an important aspect of the reverse logistics world. So just a few places.
So looking forward to, Jack Allen was on the show probably about a year and a half ago. Really enjoyed his perspective. Looking forward to getting him back on talking circular economy. I know he speaks a lot. Both of y'all have busy schedules.
Yes.
But we're looking forward to getting him back on and getting his perspective on what Cisco's doing, which was voted one of the most or the most sustainable company, or
they're close to the top. That's
Yeah.
why Jack was in Las Vegas giving a presentation to a full room, and again expanding that idea of the circular economy. He used the example of the cell phone industry. One of the changes is that the secondary market is very strong for cell phones. So the manufacturers now can entice you to return your old phone at some point and give you money for it. $200, $250 on a return phone that's not broken in pieces but works, because they can turn around and resell it into the secondary market, and they give you a new product, a new phone. So that's very circular. It's generating new sales and doing something with the old products. Jack alluded to that situation, and then he talked about Cisco's role in it. Yes, very circular economy company. Cisco's focused on that extensively, and
Absolutely.
and they find partners that think that way as well. And that's why I talked about the financial aspects of this. Is that the companies who are focused on this, laser focused on generating more circular economy initiatives, they will become more profitable. They are becoming more profitable, and the ones that focus on Net Promoter Score are becoming more profitable. So we're going to see a reward of the marketplace to those companies.
Yep. Okay, so let's tell our audience how they can learn more from plugging with RLA or plugging with Encompass. So Tony, you go first. How can folks learn more?
RLA.org. The site is up, fully functional, 100% focused on the RLA 2.0 features, benefits, events, research, everything is there now.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
And if you're listening in India, or if you're listening in Taiwan, some of the countries you named, there's something for you at rla.org. And then Encompass. Joe, tell us more.
Yes, go to solutions.encompass.com to learn more about us, or do me a big favor and go to encompass.com and go buy something from us. That would be fantastic.
There you go.
I love that.
True biz dev guy.
Yeah, action, bias for action. I love that.
That's right.
Well, and let me give one last plug on
Sure.
the RLA.org website. You go to that page and it says join the RLA community, and you can do that at no cost.
Yeah.
You can simply join the RLA community and get started on this new approach to what are we doing with our returns.
So just being part of the newsletter that you all produce and the Smart Brief is fantastic information about this industry. You can learn a lot there.
You've been bragging a lot about that Smart Brief.
Well, theirs particularly.
I know.
Yeah.
You're doing your homework for these shows. I like that, Greg.
I'm fooling you.
Well, big thanks. Always a pleasure to sit down. Tony Shirota, Executive Director with the Reverse Logistics Association, and Tony's longtime friends and colleague. I knew, Joe, you were going to fit right in, and you did.
Yeah, he's
Joe
a natural.
Hurley, Senior Vice President, Business Development at Encompass Supply Chain Solutions.
And Scott, do you have time to plug the fact that this is monthly series leading up to a big event, right?
Huge
Yeah.
event. You're reading my mind and maybe my show notes. One of the last things we always cover is we encourage people to come out and check us out in person. We love sitting down with leaders that are out there making it happen across supply chain, and we try to get out there often. Got a new van to help us do so. It's no longer driving things around in the old Honda Accord. No, we really enjoy getting out and connecting with people and getting their stories heard. So, as Tony's alluding to, one of the events we've got coming up that we're really excited about is the Reverse Logistics Association Conference and Expo out in Vegas in February 2020. I bet when you were out there, you're doing a little scouting, maybe.
I was. It was the same hotel. I was in the Mirage for ASCM, and I said, I like this room better than our room.
Did you get him to switch it?
The meeting rooms, yes. I got him to
Outstanding.
switch some meeting rooms.
Hard to beat the Mirage.
Don't ever doubt. We can't doubt Tony. All right, so that event we're going to be broadcasting live throughout. This is kind of this series we've designed as a build up to the event. These conversations once a month will focus on the reverse logistics industry and the returns and really everything that goes into the reverse logistics. Tony will be with us hopefully most of the time, although we'll be fighting with his schedule maybe, but we'll plug him in remote. We've got some other guest speakers like Joe teed up that are passionate about this industry. And then it's going to culminate with our live broadcast throughout the days there in Vegas. Roughly about 2.5 days, right?
It'll be a pre-conference day and then 2 conference days.
There you go.
3 full days. Okay. Looking forward to that. February 2020.
Maybe some remote broadcast from a craps table, 2 o'clock in the morning.
Maybe.
I'll be there.
You won't be alone.
Good on you. Maybe we should do that.
You're going to be returning all of your money to
That's right.
the Raj. Okay.
Push it right in the middle of the table.
Proven best practice. Learn more about that event at rla.org, or you can shoot us a note. We're going to mention a couple of events here. If you can't find what you're looking for, go to the events tab at supplychainradio.com, or you can shoot us a note to connect at supplychainnowradio.com. All right, so Greg, before we get to that big event in Vegas in February, we've got a couple of events between here and there, including October 9th, where you're going to be leading our live broadcast where?
At the Georgia Logistics Summit, right? So we're going to be at the
Georgia Manufacturing Summit.
Sorry, I keep saying that. That's how Scott and I met, is the Georgia Logistics Summit. So, the Georgia Manufacturing Summit by the Georgia Manufacturing Alliance, right, at the Cobb Galleria Center, October 9th.
That's right.
So, and Scott, you're going to be doing something interesting there with a panel session.
We got a great panel with leaders from across industry: UPS, Mitsubishi, Point A/Georgia Pacific, and HMTX Industries, which is a huge global flooring manufacturer, talking about trends of tracking supply chain. And the event has got keynotes from P&G and Kia, so you can learn more at GeorgiaManufacturingAlliance.com. Okay, and then flip the calendar a couple of weeks. We're going to be back in Charleston.
Yep.
What's going on October 23rd?
So that's Tech Talk with the South Carolina Competes organization. So we shared some time with them at the AIAG, the Automotive Industry Action Group, and South Carolina Automotive Council event just a few weeks back. Did not get to go to Magnolia's for dinner, so I'm really looking forward to this.
But we aren't
for a lot of reasons.
Where we went to dinner, we'll still remain nameless.
We're not going to talk about that. Yeah. But yeah, that's going to be good. So we're going to get to talk to some tech leaders. We've met some great logistics leaders in South Carolina. What they are doing is truly impressive. You know, what they've already done, particularly with the automotive industry, but with ports and other industries
Aerospace.
as well. Yeah,
infrastructure. And you can learn more about that event and some neat things that the South Carolina Council on Competitiveness is doing at scompetes.org. I sure am glad they shortened that on the URL.
Yes, sir.
That is a mouthful. Mm-hmm. But they're doing good work, and they're making it happen, especially in South Carolina and beyond. Okay, and then Austin, Texas, we were just talking with our friends at EFT this morning. We've got the Logistics CIO Forum in November 7th and 8th, 2019. Mm-hmm. What's going on there, Greg?
So that is their Logistics CIO Forum. About 300 logistics CIOs from all over. Google. I didn't even know Google had a logistics CIO, but from Google, Redwood, Forward Air, and a number of other companies getting together and sharing ideas among themselves, but also with solution providers and logistics service providers. So that's going to be a great couple days in Austin.
Absolutely.
Help Austin keep it weird.
So working on a couple things between now and the end of the year. It's a busy time in the supply chain event and trade show calendar. And then we talked about, of course, Vegas with Tony and the RLE crew in February. And then finally, Modex 2020. I know, Tony, you and your team were there last year. We collaborated on that joint industry association approach. Modex will be bringing about 35,000 people from across supply chain. It's one of the largest supply chain trade shows in North America.
And Scott knows all of them.
Well, so we're going to be broadcasting throughout the 4 days, and we just secured our keynote for the 2020 Atlanta Supply Chain Awards. And that's going to be Christian Fisher, President and CEO of Georgia Pacific. So we're excited about that. Looking forward to Modex, and it's free to attend.
Yep.
ModexShow.com to learn more. Okay, I think that does it. Did we miss anything?
I can't imagine that we did. One thing I would like to say is if you're watching this is the second episode of the series with Tony and the Reverse Logistics Association. Go back and watch the first one, and stay tuned for the next couple, three more, right? And do take a look at this. Look, this is a really, really important issue. It's not just about financials, as we talked about. It's also about sustainability, and that's important to this generation and to the next generation and the generations to come. So,
yep, that's a perfect way to conclude today's conversation. So, big thanks.
Just thought of that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's very genuine. I think it's very applicable to the conversation. Big thanks to Tony Shirota, Executive Director with the Reverse Logistics Association. Once again, big thanks to Joe Hurley for coming down, making the trip down from Knoxville, Senior Vice President, Business Development at Encompass Supply Chain Solutions, Inc. Big thanks to my passionate co-host, Greg White. Good to see you. One more show today. And to our audience, thanks for tuning in. One of the new things we're doing is we're publishing these to our YouTube channel. You kind of get kind of behind the scenes video snapshot of the conversation. So check that out at YouTube. Check out our podcast, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, all the leading sites where podcasts can be found. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. Of course, you can check us out at supplychainnowradio.com too. On behalf of our entire team, this is Scott Luton wishing you a wonderful week ahead, and we will see you next time on Supply Chain Now Radio. Thanks, everybody.